All right, so let's talk about working with the paragraph panel. Now, to get to the paragraph panel, simply select your text box or any type within inside of a box. Go to your properties, scroll down here. Below character, you will see paragraph. Now, this first line deals with nothing but paragraph alignment. I'm not going to go into that as you should have already read about it, and you can feel free to experiment to see what that looks like. But if you don't see the other options, over here in the bottom right, below your paragraph alignments, click More Options. And that'll bring this up. I only want to hit a couple things on this particular panel. The first is the space after paragraph. You'll notice that whenever you look at this text, we actually have multiple paragraphs, but they're tough to distinguish because each line sort of runs into the next one. So to increase the amount of space after a paragraph, you will come over here. See that little arrow with it pointing to a box? That's your space after. And you can adjust the space after a paragraph by simply clicking on the up or down arrow. So if we want to increase the space, we click up, and it's going to increase it by 0.0625. And we can just keep doing that till we find something that helps our paragraphs seem distinguishable one from another. And that's really the key when it comes to adjusting the space. If you can't tell that they're separate paragraphs, you probably need to increase the space. At the same time, don't go so overboard that you have so much space that all of a sudden it stops reading as a story and becomes basically a focus on each paragraph. So let's drop that back down to 0.125. That looks decent. Now, the other thing I want to point out inside the paragraph panel is that technically, if you don't want to do a space after, there is a space before, does the exact same thing, but you need to use either one or the other. And I find the space after to be the most convenient. Now, if we keep scrolling down, I want to point out something to you. You're going to notice that there's this hyphenate button, and it may already be checked. What that means is that it's allowing your paragraph text to hyphenate when a certain word is too long and it's about to touch the edge of the text box. So for example, you'll notice civilization right here is split across two lines by hyphenating it. Now, in this particular case, we don't really have a lot of hyphenated words one after another, but some clients, and in some cases, this hyphenation may not be wanted. So there's a couple different ways that you can deal with that. You can come over here inside your paragraph panel and deselect it for either the entire text box, which is what we currently have selected. So anything that was hyphenated on the edge of that text is now not. Or let's go back to our hyphenation. Or if you only want to do it at one particular area, so let's say, for example, you have 3 hyphenated lines, but you just want to adjust one of them, then take your type tool, come over here and select or highlight the word that you don't want to be hyphenated. Inside your paragraph panel, come down here and deselect it. So that one has been turned off, but you'll notice that this other one, amphibians, is still hyphenated. So you can control it at the entire text box level or at a paragraph level by simply clicking in front of the paragraph and doing the same thing, or at the individual word level. So a couple different ways that you can handle those different hyphenations. Now, another thing you're going to notice when you're working with paragraphs is what we call widows. In this particular case, it's whenever you come to the end of a paragraph and you have 1 or 2 words at the bottom of that paragraph. And notice how awkward it visually looks as you're going through those paragraphs. This looks normal, but when you come to this one, this just seems really odd. It creates an awkward amount of spacing. So a couple different ways that you can deal with these widows is taking your selection tool, clicking on it. You can always adjust the size of your text box just a bit to sort of reshuffle. Now in this particular case, I don't think bringing it in is going to help. In fact, it's creating more widows. So what happens if we expand it? That's normal size. We're going to go just a bit outside the margin here. So by just taking it outside the margin just a bit, notice how some of our paragraphs have cleaned up rather nicely, but we still have a widow on a few others. So if that method works well for most of them, but you just have 1 or 2 that you want to deal with, another thing that you can adjust is the actual tracking. So I'm going to bring that in. Let's see what the tracking will do. So with the text box selected, I'm just going to adjust the tracking for everything. Or again, you can do it per word or per paragraph, depending on what you have selected. All right, so let's try adjusting the tracking for this particular paragraph to see if we can't get this word up on one of the other lines. And keep in mind, as we're adjusting the tracking, what we're doing is we're controlling the space uniformly between each letter of the text that we have selected. So with that highlighted, let's come over to our properties panel. We're going to scroll up till we get to the tracking, which is right here. And let's try just adjusting it by -1 and see what that'll do. Well, look at that. -1 was enough to get the widow onto the line above it. Now, another way that you can deal with some of these widows, depending on your text, for example, notice the next paragraph right here. We've got 2 words. We can always bring down additional text by doing what's called a soft return to sort of force additional text onto that bottom line. And so over here, what we could do is right after up close or smelled, add your cursor and do a shift return. And now instead of 2 words, you now have 3. So again, just a couple different ways that you can deal with widows when working with paragraphs of text.